I think oftentimes when one records, the meeting is might be more fruitful. I don't want to say our meeting won't be fruitful. I don't want to curse it, but I'm saying one of the things that we need to work on is getting community managers engaged in this. And I'm hoping the trip to Portland is going to help get people at about 2:27 is my flight.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
okay,
getting into, yeah.
Okay, no, that sounds cool. Well, I will, I'll record this. Georg, I have the DNI recording from yesterday. I'll get that up today.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep, and anyway, I'm gonna mute a little bit.
Crap, I saw that DNI meeting come across the radar and I did not put it on my calendar because I'm stupid, so.
You can watch the recording.
Yeah, I'm sure it was an excellent meeting. So the things we looked at last time were a couple of pull requests that Jesus put together, and we talked about velocity and the difference between velocity and community growth and that distinction, and the importance of tracking issues. And I think there's also been some discussion on the mailing list and in our monthly meeting about difference between engineering and the growth of getting people to use a metric. So that was the discussion in the monthly meeting a couple days ago, and then Jesus sent out a nice summary email that Matt and I think a few other folks responded to. So Jesus, do you have a preference about where we start?
Not especially. I would like to talk a bit about this velocity idea, because I think there is like two different issues there.
Yeah,
one
I agree.
is about of the vocabulary and how we call things, and the other one is about the subject matter. So, I mean, what do we want to learn from this, let's say, velocity? Because from the point of view of naming, I agree with Daniel Herman. I think that what we are really talking about is acceleration, because it's basically the second derivative from the actual metric, which seems, in this case, seems to be the number of commits, for instance, if we are talking about activity. So velocity would be number of commits per month, and acceleration would be the variation of number of commits per month.
Yeah.
And if we agree on the vocabulary, the rest is more important from my point of view, which is why this metric is important. And here is where I agree with Ben that proposed the metric, that this gives you a lot of information about whether not only if the project is growing or not, but whether the project is becoming stable, maybe because there is no more, let's say, interesting stuff to do, or even it's starting to decline. So from the point of view of growth maturity decline, I think that this single metric captures that very well, and can be applied to any metric related to activity. I mean, can be commits, but can also be issues, can also be pull requests, or almost anything else.
The velocity and acceleration can be applied to anything that we can count in a repository.
Yeah, but in addition, if the thing is related to activity, it is a good metric for learning about in which stage the project is. I mean, it is growing, and in that case, at what pace it is growing. It is maturing, because you see that the metric is starting to like a plateau where things seems to be quite similar to the month before, or whether the project is starting to decline because activity is declining, maybe because the project matured enough, there is no need for additional functionality or whatever. But that allows you to know in which of these stages are. As Ben said, I think none of them is good or bad. Depends on what you want and what the project is doing. And we know for many projects that has been a long time around, and they are declining, but still are very important. So
it seems like the velocity and acceleration are ways to express what I think of as meta constructs that transcend a lot of the metrics. So when we think about it on Augur, one of the reasons that time is baked into the way that we represent metrics is because that helps people see the trend, the acceleration or the deceleration in the context of their projects in a fairly straightforward visual way. Velocity is interesting to me because in my head, I'm trying to decide, do I think about velocity in my own project, or do I think about velocity in the context of other projects? So, you know, if I'm like at some point, what does velocity mean in the context of my project? Because if I'm hypothetically running a community, I'm more interested in knowing what the change over time is. Are there peaks? Are there valleys? Are people leaving the project? And there was some discussion about last time about the number of contributors versus the volume of contribution.
Yeah,
And
so I think, no, please go ahead.
No, and I think the number of contributors might be, it's like more of a community growth measure, right? And it probably doesn't apply to the notions of velocity or acceleration.
So in any case, when you're comparing to your own project, I think that all of these metrics make sense. That when you are comparing to other projects, maybe you need to have into account the size, at least for velocity, because the number of commits per month, for instance, for a big project is obviously going to be much bigger than for a very small project.
Right.
Acceleration is maybe different because if, for instance, you're having twice the velocity of the last month, that applies both to big and small projects. Basically means you are multiplying by 2 any activity you may have before.
And that would be acceleration when you're comparing month to month, right? The 2x.
Yeah. So that's interesting because when you're thinking about comparing projects and trying to find metrics that allow you to compare the different stages for projects which are way different, maybe acceleration could be better than velocity. And velocity should be taken relative to size or something like that, if you want to compare.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing you say that velocity on an individual project basis, velocity is probably what I'm more interested in than I'm sorry, acceleration is what I'm more interested in.
Oh, whichever.
Yeah, the acceleration and the flip side of that, deceleration.
Right.
It's not the fall that kills you; it's the rapid deceleration. It's an old physics joke. So I think are these, when we talk about documenting concepts like this that span many different metrics, I don't know that we have a placeholder in the way that we have structured the repository right now to deal with that.
So the idea was, when Ben started to open these issues, the idea was to have like higher level metrics on top of the basic ones that we have now. And he proposed this one as one of those. So maybe we could just open new descriptions. Like if you remember, we were commenting about having them as meta metrics or higher level metrics or something like that. Because in fact, this one, for instance, can be applied to different metrics. So you can talk about acceleration and velocity in commits or in issues or in pull requests. And the concept is.
I agree. So we just would create a markdown document explaining meta metrics as they really become, I think. So if I have a meta metric like this, I think about it as metadata about metrics. And so we want to describe what these things are. In the case of a lot of the metadata that we are choosing to describe about metrics, it's fairly self-apparent. But in this case, I think we need a separate description, and then it simply would become acceleration and velocity would be described or as almost a true false on any given metric. Like it either applies or it doesn't. But it could be I think it becomes a part of, that's why I think of it as a meta metric, because it becomes a part of every other metric.
And this relates to what Daniel Herman said about considering the snapshot metrics, the metrics that you can measure from time to time as time series. And then this would be things that you can apply on those kinds of metrics. Because if the metric can be understood as a time series, you can always compute the velocity and the acceleration by definition. I mean.
Yeah, and as we've been doing metrics with Augur, I mean, everything is time. Almost everything is time series. Very little. It does not have a temporal dimension to it, and I think that is implicitly what. I mean, we didn't use the word acceleration, but I think that is the right word to describe why the time series data is important, or the time series dimension on the data.
In any case, acceleration itself is also time series in the sense that you can calculate acceleration over time, and you can find out which periods, for instance, acceleration is positive or is negative. And based on that, you can find out when the project is growing and when the project is declining, just by looking at how acceleration varies over time.
Yeah. We want to take it to do on that, Jesus. Do you want us to, what would you, like I could take it to do to create a markdown draft and you could take a look at it.
Yeah, or we can even, if you want, discuss a bit more in the issue, just writing down these things that we are talking now in the issue that Ben opened, and maybe based on that open the markdown. But maybe we can already open the markdown. I think we have a consensus on this.
Yeah, I think so. Let me look at the issue.
So let me
burstiness distribution. So
the burstiness was another one, which could also be, but I think it's basically the same kind of stuff in the sense that when they talk about burstiness, it's basically another different feature of the time series.
Where did Ben open the issue? I'm not seeing it on
let me look at the number. I think there was one.
It's not on the, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong.
It's on the working group repo.
Yep, I'm in the wrong repo. I told it to go working group, but.
It's issue number 15.
15, yeah.
All right. And the way Ben framed it, if you look at it, it was more like, and it says development speed, and it says this metametric can be relative and compared to separate projects or 2 points in the same project, or can be basic, blah, blah, blah. And then the nice thing I find is that the use cases, because that's where he relates the metric to some use for the metric. I mean, it's not only something that you can compute, but it's something that you can find a value on it. And on the other hand, I like the structure that Ben has used, which is quite similar to the structure that we have for the other metrics. And maybe we can just take this, modify it a bit in terms of talking about acceleration, velocity, and all of this, and directly move this to a markdown file. So what do you think?
There was a question in there, but I didn't quite get it in my head what the question was. Is the question whether to work on it, to have the discussion on the issue, or start the markdown, or both?
No, I mean, we can discuss this thing about the naming velocity or acceleration, and talking about this is really a way of expressing time series and so on. I mean, all of this discussion that we are having now, we can either follow up in the issue or just move the issue to a markdown and maybe have the discussion elsewhere.
I think taking the issue and working on a markdown document seems like, I guess the only we could attach the, just trying to think about the pragmatically how we have a discussion about a markdown document if it exists. Do we create a draft of it and then put it in the repository as a pull request at some point and allow commenting on that? So I think like there's like a level of work probably that I'm thinking needs to be done to create the markdown and develop it enough to propose it as and maybe that's something that we could do. I'm talking out loud. I'm trying to think, how can we in a lot of contexts, they'll do collaborative editing on, Overleaf or a Google Doc, and to work something like this out. And I'm trying to think of the right GitHub way to do that.
So I think that the right way from the GitHub point of view could be just to take the text that we have now in the issue, maybe with some modifications, and propose it as a pull request. If nobody opposes, we have a first version of it. If somebody opposes, that's because of a comment in the pull request itself, and then we discuss in the pull request whether the comment can be addressed or not, or whatever, until we reach some consensus, and that's the version that we adapt. So if you agree, we could follow that procedure, and we can involve.
Yeah, looking more closely at the issue now, I think that's a reasonable way to go, and we can comment then on the pull request.
If you want, I can easily produce a pull request with that and the comments that we have in, and then we follow up discussion in the pull request, and we tell Ben to get involved if he wants. Yeah. And at some point we convert that into a file just by accepting the pull request.
So is what he's proposing is development speed, what we're proposing is velocity? Because I see his formula is code commits over code merge duration. That's an interesting formula. To me, it's a little bit different than what I had in my mind for the construct of velocity. And I'm not sure I completely understand the logic there. Like, it would seem that a project would have to function in a particular way for code commits over code merge duration to have meaning.
So I think that there are like two different things. One
development speed and velocity.
Yeah, I don't know the English word for it, right? Because I'm speaking English, but in any case, one is.
Me neither.
Okay, one is either getting commits over time, basically, and the other one is getting commits compared to something like, in this case, code merge duration, which is what they're talking about. And I find both are telling different stories. And maybe the one that Ben is proposing, we should stick to what he is proposing, and forget a bit about the other thing. And even with a different name, I don't know, but sticking to this definition, because let's say the new thing that I find in this metric proposal is this, which is not related to just a period of time, but to the period of time that that code merge is taken. It's like a way of how quick people are adopting suggestions or something like that.
I think I would just suggest we add velocity as a component of these are, well.
Maybe what do you think? Maybe we could have both of them and try to compute them for some projects and see whether there seems to be some correlation or not. Because the two concepts seems to be to some extent similar, but they are different in them. So I think that what Ben thinks is that both are capturing different information about the project. Because, the usual way of thinking is, as Daniel Herman said, velocity is just the number of commits over time. And then if the project is accelerating, that's because it's having more and more commits over time, commits per month, for instance. But this area is a bit different, because it could happen that you're actually having less commits, but the time to merge them is becoming larger, for instance. And that means that this number is getting smaller even when you're having more commits because of the time to merge.
I see.
So, and that's interesting, because in fact, I see a relationship here to how you are dealing with, let's say, new proposals, new ideas, innovation to some extent, which are the proposals for code merge. And how long does it take to adopt those? Compared to the number of commits that you have.
So I think something surfaces in my mind here, that velocity and acceleration, I think I can apply to issues, pull requests, code commits. I can apply those to metametrics across the board. I think development speed is a little different, because it really does apply to code commits.
Yeah.
Like, it's the code is the one thing that gets merged. I guess pull requests too, but when I'm thinking about issues or other similar kinds of metrics where you can just count the number of events and show that.
In the case of issues, maybe you could use issues with respect to issue fixing solution, issue fixing duration.
So for issues, maybe it's issue resolution time.
So number of issues by issue resolution time, or something like that. So it could be a similar metric, maybe telling a different story, because that could be related to how quick we are reacting to suggestions by others.
Yeah, I'm wondering if development speed is actually not a meta metric, but a metric.
A metric itself, yeah.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
Because issue resolution time, I think, is a metric itself, and I think development speed is described as a metric itself. And I think velocity and acceleration they apply across the board to a lot of things.
Yeah, so in fact, Ben is saying exactly that when the next row, he says development acceleration, this simply compares development speed in two different points in time.
Right.
Which is exactly the idea of acceleration. So I think maybe the wording is a bit difficult here because he is not meaning velocity, but a different kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's not written, I mean, this is just nitpicking. It's not written at a meta level really yet, because the development is really very focused on code, and I guess issues are really the principal thing on in a project that isn't code, right?
Yeah. So in this case, maybe what we can do is to try to write it in the same way that we are writing the regular metrics, and which is quite similar to this, but not exactly the same. And try to deal with that. So see if it works.
Do you want me to put together, like, it sounds like there's a development speed metric, and there's also these two meta metrics of velocity and acceleration that need to be pulled out of here. Do you want me to take a stab at one of those and you take a stab at the other?
Yeah, that's fine.
You can pick.
If I can, I prefer this one. So the one that Ben proposed at the sense.
Okay, so the velocity. So I'm
what he calls development speed.
Oh, okay.
As it is in the issue right now, right?
So do you want to write up development speed as a separate metric, and I'll write up velocity and acceleration as meta metrics? Is that what you're saying?
That's fine, but if you prefer the other way around, that's fine too.
No, that works for me.
Okay.
That works for me.
Great. Then, I think that the thing that we should be needing in both cases, let me check, I'm just looking at the template that we had. Okay. Yeah. In the template that we had, it is description, use cases, formula, filter and visualization, sample implementation, non-implementations, test cases. So it's quite similar to what he has. The order is a bit different. Basically, I'm going to try to write it that way. And then we can interact in the pull request. And if you feel, or if anybody else feels like we should be dealing with it in a different way, yes, let's discuss in the pull request. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think we're good there.
Great. Another thing that we should be talking is about the pull requests that have been seen for a while.
I think that's a good subject for the next topic if you want to.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to say whether if you find it's reasonable to go on with those.
I think it's reasonable to merge. I think some of the questions I asked in the pull request don't necessarily need to be resolved. And
I tried to follow, let me check, for the first pull request, which is number 13.
Yeah, that's what I'm on.
It was refining metrics about new contributions. I think there is no specific comment.
There was one, well, the question I had was about organizations.
Okay.
Just,
I cannot see it right now.
It's let's see. Did I not submit this review? Holy crap. Is there a step that I missed here?
Or maybe
If I
there's
see
an issue or something?
if I see my comments as pending, does that mean I haven't shared them?
Okay, I think so.
Oh,
Sorry, I think so.
I'm sorry.
So then
I thought that I
don't
did
bother.
this.
Just
I'm
if you
submitting
look,
it now.
yeah,
All
okay,
right, I'm
please
sorry.
do.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I
I'm
submitted it.
seeing it right now, so don't worry. I'm seeing
I
it right now.
I didn't realize I had to hit another button. I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
no problem, no problem.
That's
So okay,
I
okay,
feel stupid.
okay, nice. Yeah, organization is a good topic.
So yeah, there's I think
Yeah,
most of the time when we're talking about organizations, we really mean the people who do you work for and who's paying you, and that's what we mean by organization. But because GitHub has this notion of organization, I think
yeah.
there's yeah, I have same on the other one.
Yeah, from the high level point of view, I think they are the kind of organization that matters to the project, usually companies or stuff like that, because they want
I
to.
think so too.
But the problem is, I agree with you, how do you map that to a specific data source?
Well, it's
Because,
very artisan. It's artisan
yeah,
work, right?
yeah. So in our case, we have this sorting hat tool that uses different approaches depending on the scenario. And usually it tries to capture the idea of organization that the project has. But it's very much time consuming, and in many cases you cannot automate it because you need assistance from the project itself. So I agree with in the cases where the data source provides information related to that, like GitHub, for instance, maybe we could use that. And that could be a node to the definition. Let me check out the file itself. Yeah. The problem is that the data that we have here is maybe a bit too terse to include this kind of clarifications. And but we could do that in the markdown file with the details of the metric. And maybe there we could say, well, if the data source is providing, as GitHub does, the idea of organization or group or whatever, you can use that. If you
Yeah,
have
I mean,
if you have more reliable information, like for instance, there are many projects that maintain files with affiliation for people. If they are
I think maybe for now the best move would be to be clear that we don't mean GitHub organization, because I don't think many people actually care about that.
okay, yeah, that's
I mean,
sensible.
unless you disagree, but it's a point of confusion, because when people are very accustomed to GitHub and nothing else, when you say organization, the first thing they think of is a GitHub organization. But most of the people, I think, in this community, when we mean the thing we were just talking about,
Yeah.
you know, who do you work for?
Yeah, no, I agree. And but do you think we should state that in this file or in the specific files with the metrics?
So this file is this file not a metric?
This is the listing of metrics.
Yeah.
And which means that we have like one line for each of the metrics. It's just a table. So that's why adding more information there.
Okay, so this
could also be just thinking about.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, now I'm getting it. Now I'm getting it. This is not the definition of the issue resolution efficiency. This is just the listing of it as a thing.
Right.
That should be in the definition itself. I don't think it needs to be in the table.
Okay. In any case, I was thinking that since this is in fact generic to any metric using organizations, maybe we could have a kind of a footnote or something in the table. Just saying when we refer to organizations, we are not referring to GitHub organizations, but organizations the way the project understands them or something like that.
I think a footnote like that would make it easier for people to come as a newcomer to that list and comprehend it clearly.
Okay, good. In that case, let me check if I can change that from here, but otherwise I can do it later. Let me check.
Well, we could do it. I can merge the pull requests and then we could just do that later.
Okay, let's do one thing. Let's, if you agree, please accept the pull request, and I open a ticket, an issue, saying we need to do that. And I'm going to do it right now so that I don't forget.
Okay, and I'm going to merge it right now so I don't forget.
Okay, I'm opening the issue. Okay, it's now issue number 16, and I'm assigning it to myself so that I can check it later
Okay.
and modify the file. And I would be pull requesting the change, at least to this file, but I would be reviewing some other files just in case we should be writing the clarification in some other places. Okay, good. And then there is the discussion on the other one, and here I have your comment, and I didn't answer because I preferred to talk.
Okay. I don't know that you actually had this until 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, no, that's right. But you commented it.
Yeah, we
during the
talked about it
meeting,
last time.
remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was thinking about it, and I'm completely not sure. But the main thing is maybe we should be talking about a time period on something in all the places, and it's again the same issue as before. Should we be discussing this at the level of the list of metrics, or at the level of the description of the metrics?
Right.
And since this is the detailed description, so I find it more convenient to discuss it here. So basically, I agree with you.
To discuss it in the context of the metric?
In the detailed description of the metric, which is the case.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So for instance, you say this, for example, 60-day window from issue open date to issue whatever. The problem is that I don't find a way of finding this kind of shorthand that you mentioned.
Yeah, I dreamt of having that as a thing, but I don't think I know of what it would be. I wonder if you've talked about filters before, and I'm thinking of it as parameters. And we had a long email discussion about that a month ago, and I wonder if this becomes part of the description of these velocity and acceleration meta metrics that that there's necessarily a dimension of time that, I mean, it's not guaranteed, it's not a priori decision that all velocity and acceleration is going to be evaluated in a 1 week window or a 1 month window or a 60-day window. That addressing the windows, I guess I call it window size because that's what you call it. Addressing the window size is a meta construct related to velocity and acceleration. Really?
Yeah, because it's basically the period where you are calculating velocity, for instance, right?
Yeah, and it can be specified when you implement a metric, and maybe in the metric implementation, we would want people to say, and I think you have that in there, you'd want people to indicate when they deploy something what that window is, and there could be various ways of doing it. There won't be a common shorthand.
What do you think if, for now, in the description, we state basically what you say? So this refers to a specific period of time. And then at somewhere, I don't know if it could be implementation, it could be a formula. We state a variable, which is the period of time, so that later we can parameterize based on that one, on the period of time. Okay?
Yep, and I'm going to add something, a little bit of detail about that to the velocity and acceleration.
Okay, so if you want, what I can do is to produce a new version of this file with this, basically stating that in the definition and be more clear in the formula, and then you comment if you agree or not on.
I'll agree. Yeah, if you make the change, we can just merge the pull request.
Okay, I'm going to do the change, and then you have a look at it. But feel free to comment if you don't find it as you wish, right?
Yeah, I think just putting it in there, however you put it in there, will be sufficient to be more clear, and that will be helpful to people. So.
Okay, I provide a new version of it with that. And
all right. I think I'm watching this pull request.
Okay. So. Yeah, I think so. So in any case, let me check, because I think that you are as a reviewer for this one. Yes, you are. Great.
Yep.
Okay. Then we are done with the pull requests.
All right.
And
have other things. Did we want to talk at all about the emails and the discussion of the difference between the metrics and the presentation of metrics and having people look at things? That's, I think, the only.
I don't know if we need Daniel for this. You saw that he opened a specific file for discussing this in our repository of him.
Oh.
Maybe we should try to follow up there because.
Which repository did he open that in?
I don't remember the link. I can send it to you later.
Was it one of ours or one of his?
It was one of him in the thread discussing this in the mailing list. At some point, he said, "I'm opening a repository for following up the discussion here." When we started to become too technical, do you remember that at some point we started to discuss on what is a metric from an abstract point of view and so on, and he started to talk about time series and all of this. And my idea was to iterate with him in that repository and come back to the group with something, but I couldn't.
Okay.
So right now in the repository there is only what Daniel was proposing, and maybe it's important that he's involved because I think that he has a more specific view. So I'm not that picky about how to define this because I'm more interested in this thing that Daniel called the engineering view. I mean, this is useful for something. How do you implement that? And he is more interested in finding a formal way of defining all the metrics, and that's also important for me. But it's a bit like a second step.
I mean, as an academic, I'm very interested in that question. It's not where I'm focused right now, but I think it's a really important discussion. I don't see the repo in the email list that I'm looking at, but
let me check because maybe he invited only me, but I think he sent it to the mailing list. Let me check it.
I mean, the fact that I don't have it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, no, I think he sent it there, but maybe
it might be that I can't find it
here. So I think from the discussion that came up on Tuesday, the general premise is just to start to demonstrate the rigor that is being done around either identifying metrics, and that can be as simple as just a citation. So this metric comes from the McDonald-Goggins article. They took a look at this back, whatever. So just provide a citation, which is not what's currently happening.
That's a good idea. There's a paper that has like 50 metrics by that occurred to me to put that. So yes, I agree with that. I like that idea.
It's a really simple first step. This is also to Jesus's point, is kind of start small, right?
So can you repeat? I lost you for a moment.
Yeah, sure. So you had made a point earlier of just kind of starting small with respect to providing rigor. And I think one of the things that Danielle is talking about is if somebody brings forward a particular metric, that perhaps there's a paper that has talked about this metric and just cite this paper. Just provide some evidence. So, I mean, I think if we think about this from an academic paper perspective, if we say we're going to go look for items A, B, and C in some text, it's usually good to at least provide some evidence as to why A, B, and C exist. And that evidence can come oftentimes just from literature.
Yeah.
I would say we actually already have that field in the on those metrics markdown pages.
Okay. So maybe
that last field is external references.
Okay, so maybe just really pushing on that before we accept a new metric.
That's probably wise.
Sen, I've just written in the chat for this session the link to the repository by Daniel.
Okay, thanks. I'm sure it's in my email somewhere. I do not doubt it at all.
It is in the CHAOSS mailing list, but it is a bit hidden because it's at the end of a long thread.
Yeah.
So I think that's one area where we can easily provide some rigor, some methodological rigor. I think the other is what Jesus what you had put out yesterday to the mail list, which was a more systematic survey of how these metrics are being used in practice, which is a different method than why are these metrics important in the first place. Why
So
they're important in the first place is really just coming from literature.
in the academic community, there is some discussion to which extent, if you forget a bit about source code analysis, if the rest of the metrics is somebody actually using them or not. In fact, there was a special issue of IEEE software, which was basically about this. And in fact, it's going to be published, I think, during the next term.
That's one that Tom Menz co-edited with Daniel.
No, there was another one before that, which was specifically about software development metrics, I think is the name. And it's to be published because I think the results of the papers were early this year. So it should be published during the last part of this year, I think. And it's specifically about use cases of metrics in industry. I know because I submitted, I was not accepted, but I submitted. And the rationale for this special issue was many people think that metrics are not really used in industry, except for source code analysis, right? So we want to learn if there are people who can submit use cases of metrics, and the special issue is specifically about that. Mm-hmm. Since we have a lot of people from industry, both in CHAOSS and in the Linux Foundation events in general, maybe we could try to find out which kind of metrics they are using, and as a second step, which kind of metrics they would like to have to use. And they don't have because they don't have the software or wherever. Please, go ahead.
Actually, the interviews I'm conducting currently ask all of those questions.
Okay, great.
I'm at about around 20 in, and I'm starting to get to the point where I can start sharing those results. But I think the work that I'm doing is relevant to this.
Okay, that's perfect, like because that could be as like the starting point that I was asking for, because my impression is that the first point is to know what to ask. I mean, if you just ask people are using metrics or something, the question is too broad. You should be trying to focus. If your service is providing this evidence, that's nice, because then we can focus on, you know, more concrete questions. So I would be happy to work with you, or maybe you can just post in the mailing list, because maybe there are some other people interested too.
Well, and I think we have an opportunity with this Community Leadership Summit to make some relationships and connections with people as well.
Yeah.
That I think, because I think when I've talked to community managers in other contexts, they do have an interest in these other kinds of metrics that are not entirely source code based. It's true that source code metrics are still the lingua franca of evaluating an open source project, but I think things like community size and how people communicate about issues influence newcomer uptake. And I think everybody wants to capture the newcomers, and issues are where people start. So understanding where they, for example, get a newcomer to transit. I mean, I think something like newcomer transition from issue to code, like that progression it's a small n, but it's a meaningful ratio, I think, on a lot of projects. And it speaks to how welcoming of a newcomer a project is if somebody's able to evolve their role or they maintain a consistency with it.
My impression is that we are at a point where people are starting to realize that they need metrics, but they still didn't get, let's say, that much sophisticated to know which metrics specifically. And that's why people talk about code metrics, because they know what to talk about. If they talk about Maccabi, they know what's that. If they talk about fan out, they know what's that. And they can say, I would like to have that or not. But in the case of software development metrics, apart from commits per month or something like that, people really don't know what to measure and how to measure. It's only very specific people, and many of them we have in CHAOSS. So that's why surviving people in CHAOSS or related to that, people who already thought on metrics, is especially important because they are much more sophisticated than the mean community manager, for instance.
I agree. Could you send around a link to that IEEE special issue software?
Yeah, I will. Let me check if I can find it right now, because I think it should be already been announced.
I didn't have any other agenda items after this. Does anyone else have anything they want to bring up while Jesus is searching quickly?
I do not.
I'm taking silence as no.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. All right. Jesus, if you come across that special issue, maybe just send it out to the list or send it
Yeah,
out.
I will be sending it because
So-
I'm not finding it right now, but I will do. I will be doing that. Yeah.
All right. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks, and we'll have had a chance to meet some community managers at the Community Leadership Summit. So,
Yeah, and Sean, to your point earlier about trying to get community managers involved in this
right.
work group, that
Yeah.
should be part of your MO.
Oh yeah, that's really that is the reason I'm going, because I care about understanding the diversity and inclusion tension with growth, maturity, and decline metrics, because I think there is one.
Yep.
But my hidden agenda is recruiting community managers into the dark world that we live in here.
Hey,
It is being recorded, so now they know they can look at.
I can trim that out if you want.
No, it's all right. I can.
And then the other thing is too, on the D&I call yesterday, you're part of a panel or something like that. You're going to be asked to give at least a brief overview of CHAOSS.
I am perfectly capable of doing that.
Okay, just to
and if I will have PowerPoints, because I always have PowerPoints, and if they want them, they're there, and if they don't, they're not.
just let you know. All right, have a good time.
Thank you, Matt. I will. It's a good city.
Okay, cool. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay. Bye.